All right, so yesterday, obviously, Kevin McCarthy was officially kicked out of the House Speaker role by members of his own party, predominantly guys like Matt Gaetz. And, honestly, I thought what was going to happen from there is that you were going to have this long, drawn-out fight where McCarthy is trying to claw back to that Speaker position and maybe having to cut some sort of a deal with the Matt Gaetz wing of the party in order to keep himself there. But then we got this surprise announcement here from McCarthy himself saying that he is not going to run for the Speaker position again. And he did this entire announcement speech where he was saying this, and he was attacking Matt Gaetz, and he was also, bizarrely enough, attacking Democrats and basically trying to give the implication that it's Democrats' fault that he made these rules that allowed for one member within his caucus to, call to vacate him and then couldn't rally his caucus behind him. Somehow it's Democrats' fault for, I guess, not bailing him out at the last minute. This was also something that was echoed by Fox and Friends, where they blamed Nancy Pelosi for the Kevin McCarthy ouster, and they said, that's what you get when you work with Democrats, which is just so funny for so many different reasons. I mean, obviously, you will never catch me defending Nancy Pelosi for essentially anything, but, obviously, this was the fault of the Republican Party. This was the fault of Kevin McCarthy himself, his own ideological framework, the people who he aligns with, guys like Matt Gaetz, the deals that he himself cut, and then also his attacks against Democrats probably didn't help in any sort of effort to get Democrats to not vote for the motion to vacate, along with those 8 Republicans who tanked his candidacy or his role as the Speaker of the House. And I think that AOC explained this entire situation better than anybody. She lays out a couple of different things here. Number one, Congress was apparently supposed to be on recess this week, and Kevin McCarthy himself called people back for unclear reasons. Number two, if a motion to vacate the chair was launched, the Speaker would then have 48 hours, as I covered yesterday, breaking this entire situation down, to shore up his support before the vote, and he waived that for some reason. Okay, then number 3, McCarthy recently got a clean CR through with more Democratic votes than GOP votes, but then immediately went on TV to bash Democrats for, quote, trying to shut down the government, and he then seemed to think that Democrats were going to bail him out, and he also didn't offer Democrats anything to bail him out. So, I mean, a couple of different things here. First of all, it looks like, Kevin McCarthy is sort of just completely throwing in the towel after this vacate vote happened, and, he's worth millions and millions of dollars, and I guess he just doesn't want to have to put up with this, ongoing situation where even if he comes back and he wins the next Speaker vote within his party, somebody like Matt Gaetz could just call to vacate again, next week, and then you could go through this entire process again. So he's basically giving up entirely on that. I don't even know if he's really going to stay in Congress at all at this point. He might just go retire with his millions and go do something else. But a couple of different points that I think were good here by AOC. So, I mean, number one, he got this clean continuing resolution, the CR, working with Democrats, right? Because you had that other bill that was put forward by more, right-leaning Republicans, right? They're all insane, but even the more insane Republicans put forward that bill that I covered yesterday where they were trying to slash all of these different government programs by 30% or over 30%, and just basically taking a hatchet for, or to the ability for the U.S. government to provide aid and assistance to millions and millions of people who desperately need that aid and assistance in the United States. So, he had this clean CR that was the alternative to that deranged bill that even if that deranged 30% cut bill had made it through the House, it never would have passed through the Senate. It never would have gotten signed on Biden's desk. So it was really just virtue signaling. And so he ended up working with Democrats to get this more clean, continuing resolution through the House and sent to the Senate and onto Biden's desk. And again, he worked with Democrats to do that, and then immediately turned around and went and blamed Democrats for trying to shut the government down when it was very obviously members of his own party who were literally arguing that it was better to shut the government down than to just have a clean continuing resolution. And so, again, attacking Democrats right after you cut a deal to work with Democrats to keep the government open, probably not going to help in your effort to then get them to bail you out in this Speaker fight. And then also, we didn't offer anything basically tangible for Democrats to have any reason to bail him out. Now, I could have actually seen a situation where Democrats go to McCarthy and they say, listen, if you bring X, Y, and Z bill to a House floor vote, just a clean bill, nothing else attached, maybe this is a child tax credit or paid family leave or whatever the case may be, bring these bills, these 5 or so bills to the House floor for a clean vote, and then we'll bail you out for Speaker. I could almost see something like that happening, and I probably wouldn't have even been against that, or I'm sure that Democrats would have gone a different route. They would have said something like, okay, end the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden or something like that. So I could have have seen a reality where Democrats would have cut a deal with McCarthy to keep him in that position, but he didn't even attempt to make that happen, okay? Not at all. So, I mean, again, it's like, what the fuck did you expect? And how are you then going to turn around and blame Democrats when it was your own party, it was the rules you helped put in place that allowed for this situation to take place at all, okay? And so another portion of the CR that I just wanted to mention real quick, a couple people had questions about my take on this yesterday on my vote or my video on how this entire situation went down, was Ukraine funding, because in this cleaner CR they didn't actually include Ukraine funding. And so the justification for that, I guess, in the minds of a lot of these people was, okay, we'll remove it from this clean CR, let's save us from the government shutdown. We were hours before the shutdown was set to take place, so let's just remove it from the bill. We'll bring that up for a separate bill later down the line or very soon, and that'll be able to get passed, because obviously Democrats overwhelmingly are going to vote for that, probably a lot of Republicans will vote for that, etc. But now we're left with a difficult situation on that, to say the least, if you are somebody who supports more unconditional support for Ukraine in terms of weapons and other logistical aid. So I'll touch on that here in a second when we get to Jim Jordan. But we have a couple of different people. The real question now is, now that McCarthy's sort of thrown in the towel, who is going to replace Kevin McCarthy for the speakership? So there's going to be this battle that's taking place. I'm pretty sure that the House can't really do anything else until they nominate a new speaker. So this is basically front and center in everybody's face. You have guys like Steve Scalise, who have officially thrown their hat in the ring to be the next speaker. He wrote this entire letter that I won't even begin to subject you guys by reading it, but I'll link it down below if you for some reason want to go read Steve Scalise's pitch to the rest of the Republican conference. But he's announced and thrown his hat in the ring, which is interesting for a couple of different reasons. Number one, because this guy literally has cancer right now, and I'm pretty sure he's going through chemotherapy right now, so I'm not sure like what his physical capacity is at and whether or not he would even be able to do this. But apparently he thinks that he's in a space right now where he could actually be the next Speaker of the House. And it's also interesting just because, like, all of these Republicans, in my opinion at least, are completely insane, right? The policy agenda items that McCarthy supports, that Matt Gaetz supports, that Trump supports, everybody within this party, I think, is completely insane. And so I say that just to say that the daylight between Steve Scalise and Kevin McCarthy on actual, like, substantive policy is essentially nothing. I mean, maybe you could point out a couple of different issues where they differ slightly, but it's not as if, like, Steve Scalise is, like, some radical revolutionary next to McCarthy. No, they basically agree on probably 99% of policy issues, which again is just like, why did we even go through this entire situation? Why? Just to have Steve Scalise over Kevin McCarthy? I mean, what the fuck is the difference there on a policy front? Again, Jim Jordan announcing his candidacy to be the next Speaker of the House. Also interesting for the Ukraine aspect of this that I'm going to get to here in a second. But on top of that, I mean, what is the main thing that comes to mind when you think of Jim Jordan? I mean, outside of just the day-to-day shenanigans, the theatrics, the optics that he gets into. I mean, obviously not a guy who shies away from the camera, but the main thing that comes into my mind when I think of him was his involvement in, I guess, sort of like covering up sexual abuse at, I think it was Ohio State University when he was a wrestling coach. That's sort of like one of the main things that pops into my mind when I think of Jim Jordan. So kind of an interesting person to potentially select as the face of the Republican Party in the only chamber that they represent at the federal level in the House of Representatives. So that would be an interesting choice. Again, it's also interesting just because of the Ukraine issue. Obviously, the recent polling data that we have seen over the last couple of months shows that Republican voters, their constituents, are overwhelmingly turning against, continuing to give aid to Ukraine. And Jim Jordan says that he is against moving an aid package on Ukraine. When he was asked by Manu Raju of CNN, he said the most pressing issue on Americans' minds is not Ukraine, and I guess in his mind, the most pressing issue that Americans care about is what? Like trans women in sports or something like that? I mean, like, what the fuck have you guys been doing that is more substantive than the issue of Ukraine? I mean, I wouldn't say that Ukraine is number one in the American people's minds, but it's not as if you guys have, been focusing on kitchen table issues, okay? You're literally spending like half of your time right now doing this impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden because Hunter Biden was trading on his dad's name and getting all of these cozy jobs and making money off of that without any actual provable evidence that you have something impeachable on Joe Biden. So I mean, that's like kind of what you guys have been focusing on. Again, not exactly kitchen table issues that are forefront in the American people's minds, but again, just on the Ukraine aspect of it, because a couple of people were asking me about my position on this. So I mean, listen, I think that obviously Russia was the invader in this situation. I think Vladimir Putin is a violent criminal, a war criminal, and obviously I think that Ukraine deserves the right to defend themselves, but the question really, I mean, if you go look at the frontline maps of where this war has advanced over the last year or so, and the New York Times, and maybe I'll put this down in the description, did a sort of a map breakdown of how this war has gone over the last year, and it essentially has gotten to a stalemate, right? I mean, this was sort of the period of time where Ukraine was saying they were going to launch this massive counteroffensive, and we've given them billions and billions and billions of dollars in aid packages, weapons, economic support, all the rest of that, and it seems like basically the lines just are not moving, right? Not really moving drastically in Russia's favor or Ukraine's favor. And so to me, it's like there comes a point where you got to ask questions about like, well, when do you just, not just cut this off and allow Putin to sort of just like steamroll Ukraine, but just like, seriously attach conditions to any further aid that you're going to give to Ukraine to try to push them to the negotiating table. And, a lot of people would push back on that, and they would say like, well, what are you going to do? You're just going to force Ukraine to give up some massive portion of their territory in the Donbass or whatever the case may be. And it's like, to me, it's not really a question of like giving anything up and just allowing Putin to do anything. To me, it's more just a logistical question, right? I mean, again, you look at how the front lines have moved recently, and they're not moving. So, obviously, in my ideal situation, I would love for Vladimir Putin to just tuck his tail between his legs and waltz out of Ukraine, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And so the question is more like, if we continue to give them more and more weapons over the next couple of months and years, potentially, are they even logistically going to ever be capable of taking back the entirety or every inch of Ukrainian territory that Russia has taken during this war? And I think the answer to that is most likely no, unless you're willing to do a very, very significant escalation in terms of the kinds of weapons that we're giving them, in terms of how close the United States and our military is in terms of helping them in their counteroffensive efforts. So, I mean, again, it seems like you have a couple of different routes. You can either drastically escalate the war and then risk it spreading even further, risk, Putin escalating to the use of nuclear weapons or whatever the case may be, or you could potentially try to, get to the negotiating table, and at some point you got to come to an unfortunate reality that yes, you probably are going to have to negotiate away some sort of like a stalemate where you are not in control in the way that you were before of certain portions of your territory. And I don't really see a way around that, because again, it's not as if Ukraine is going to magically be able to retake this territory if we just give them $1 more billion in aid. And again, you have a lot more of the American people and Europeans as well who are sort of waning on continuing to give this aid. And so it's like, at some point you got to sort of like recognize the position that you're in, and maybe this is the best that it can get, maybe it's not, but what we've seen recently during this counteroffensive, it's not that promising. So I think push for diplomacy, push for some sort of an exit to this war, because if you just continue it indefinitely into the future, you're just going to see more innocent Ukrainian civilians dying. You're going to see more people who have been drafted into the Ukrainian military and the Russian military dying needlessly for borders and front lines that are essentially not changing. And that's horrific. That's a terrible situation. It's a terrible war, but you got to find some sort of an off ramp to it at the end of the day. So that's sort of my position on that. But again, it should be interesting. That's not really what Jim Jordan's position on this is at all. He's not calling for some sort of, diplomatic efforts. He's not calling specifically for any conditional aid. He's just saying, like, we're not even going to bring this up for a vote. We're not even going to, address any further aid to Ukraine. And so put that aside. Now we get to the one of the most interesting aspects of this, which is if it's not Jim Jordan, if it's not Steve Scalise, if it's not Kevin McCarthy, if it's not Matt Gaetz, who the fuck is going to be the next Speaker of the House? And apparently a lot of Republicans have been floating the idea that former President Donald J. Trump could be the next Speaker of the House. So this was tweeted out by Congressman Troy Nehls, or Niels, I guess is how you say that name. It's also been floated by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and several others as well. So this is something that is legitimately being proposed. Now, you might say, like, Trump isn't even in office right now. Obviously, he's not the president, but he's also not elected to any public office. Well, it turns out you don't really need to be in order to be the Speaker of the House. It's just whoever they decide to vote for and nominate. They could be the Speaker of the House. It could be me, I guess. It could be like, Danny DeVito or any random person, including Donald Trump. So this is something you actually got to contend with. We also had Sean Hannity go out on his show last night, and basically, according to his internal sources, I guess, or probably Donald Trump himself, who he's frequently in communication with, Hannity said that Trump might be open to helping the Republican Party, at least in the short term, and taking up this speaker role. We also had a direct quote here from Trump himself, who said, "A lot of people have been asking me to become speaker, I'm 40 to 50 points ahead in the presidential race. I don't know if he means, I guess he must mean the GOP primary, which sure, that's actually like an accurate portrayal. I don't know if in his mind he thinks he's 40 to 50 points ahead of Biden, but whatever. He says he's 40 to 50 points ahead in the presidential race, but I can help them in the process. If I can help them in the process of running it, I will do it. So this is legitimately something that Trump is apparently weighing. Now, I think personally, this would be absolutely hilarious and insane and chaotic. I think it would probably be a good reminder to a lot of Americans as to why they didn't like Trump as president, because I can't imagine him in any legitimate or serious way, handling the day-to-day logistics of being the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I mean, he'd be picking fights left and right. He would be bullying his own party members, which would be kind of entertaining. It would also be entertaining to see Donald Trump as sort of like this fake populist versus Joe Biden, who's sort of like a corporatist similar to Trump, but also has actual, some policy or populist tendencies, like with his labor board and all of that. It would be interesting to see them sort of like duke it out with Biden as the president and Trump as the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Republican Party, and seeing what sort of legislation may actually get passed in that kind of situation. That would be kind of amazing to see. But just a reminder in terms of some of the more insane things that Trump has said recently. Axios put together a short little list here, so just to remind you guys of what Trump has been up to recently. They say here in speeches and interviews and on social media in recent weeks, Trump has said that the former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, General Mark Milley, committed treason and suggested that he should be executed. He's saying we should execute Mark Milley, a general, one of the top generals in the United States, okay? He called for Judge Engoron, who's handling this New York case that I just talked about a couple days ago, called for him to be disbarred, thrown out of office, and criminally prosecuted, in addition to attacking the judge's clerk. And since then, Judge Engoron has actually issued a gag order against Trump to basically stop him, to attempt to stop him from attacking some of the people who work in his office. He also said that a New York Attorney General, who's also a part of this case, he called her a racist and a monster. He said that Special Counsel Jack Smith, who's handling the Jan 6 and classified documents cases, said that he was deranged and a psycho who looks like he's on crack or a crackhead. He posted online, quote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you," literally one day after swearing in federal court that he would not intimidate witnesses in the election interference case. He mocked Paul Pelosi after he was brutally assaulted by a home intruder. He called for police to shoot shoplifters on sight. So, if you break into, or not even break into, if you walk out of Target with like a speaker or like Pokemon cards or something, boom, death sentence, judge, jury, and executioner. Apparently, that's what he thinks the police should get to be on site. If they suspect you of shoplifting, you get murdered. Said that migrants, and this is some real Nazi shit here, said that migrants illegally crossing the U.S. border are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. Okay, so just some of the more, insane things that Trump has been up to. That's a list of literally just the last couple of weeks. So that's Donald Trump for you. Now imagine him in the position of the Speaker of the House. Now again, that could drastically backfire on Republicans, both because I don't think that he would really be able to, handle the logistics of that kind of a position in order to effectively get anything done or anything passed. It would definitely be a reminder to a lot of Americans in terms of how absolutely insane he is when you give him the reins of power. So I think it could backfire. I think it would also be kind of entertaining because of, who Trump is. He definitely has that, inherent entertainer quality to him. So, I mean, there you have it. That's the most updated information that we have right now. Again, this is a process that's probably going to take place over the next week or so. And, again, like no House measures are going to be able to get tackled. The House is effectively like shut down right now until they decide who's going to be the next speaker. So we'll have to keep on this story, but it is certainly getting interesting.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying